everyone. I am Kyle Cherrick, the host of Wisconsin Foodie on PBS, and I'm sitting with Chef Sean Sherman, and we are here at Madison College for the Madison College Chef Demo Series, sponsored by Vollrath. Chef, thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. A little introduction on you. So I know a lot of people that have cooked in a lot of great places, but I don't know many chefs that have spoken at the UN, spoken at Yale, recently won the award for the best cookbook in America by the James Beard Foundation, and still is insisting on both an evolution and a revolution within cuisine because of the style that you're cooking. So in your own words, just kind of, what's it all? I know what it's about, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what are you
well,
about?
you know, my company's called the Sioux Chef, S-I-O-U-X, so a little play on words, and we focus on indigenous foods of North America. So we really look at the entirety of an indigenous food system and all that goes into that. So we look at Native American agriculture and seed saving and soil management and farming technique and wild food and plant identification and harvesting. We look at cooking techniques and food preservation and, you know, where can we, where did people source salts, fats, sugars, of course history in general when it all comes down to it.
Yeah.
So we apply all of this to really look at an extremely underrepresented culinary scene, which is the Native American food scene all across this continent. Because it's just that realization of no matter where you are in North America, you're standing on indigenous land and there's history and people and beautiful food all around there.
And I'm going to steal a line from you, but there's 600 plus tribes and not that many Native American restaurants.
Yeah, that's the thing. So you look at big cities like New York, you know, Brooklyn, Manhattan, LA, Chicago.
All Native American names or versions
of. Just zero Native American restaurants in all of those cities, right?
Yeah.
And it's insane to think about that because like those are some of the top food cities in the entire world. And to have absolute no representation is fairly insane. So for us, and there's a group of other talented Native chefs across the country, throughout Canada, Mexico, Alaska, around here, and you know everybody's just kind of in this vein to really help push an understanding of Native American foods and indigenous foods of North America into the forefront. So we feel really lucky to have this voice to be able to not only talk about it, but to do it as our career and to really help bring the education and knowledge around with it.
So you've cooked throughout Mesoamerica and North America. I mean, that's a pretty broad swath. But you've really gone deep into the heritage of different tribes, separate from yours. You're Lakota, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So food is based on trend, but you're going pre-colonial, pre-trend, when, the earth was both the larder and the creation of flavor and the medicine cabinet for when food was medicine, but it was also deliciousness. So how do you approach like fitting into the culinary world based on trend, but then also what you're putting forward, which has got a lot more heart in it?
And you know, we weren't as concerned about the trend part of it because we really felt this knowledge should have been out there anyways. And we're trying to do something positive to impact the communities that a lot of us from Native American reservations grew up on, and trying to fight back a system that was feeding us commodity foods, over-processed foods in general, and creating a lot of health epidemics because of these food deserts that were created. So we are really just trying to understand and study how to bring that to the forefront, and we're just doing it by example. And so our passion is really just getting it out there, and it's looking at every region how unique it is, because like you said, there's a lot of tribes out there. You know, there's 573 recognized tribes in the US, 622 in Canada. Mexico has an entire fifth of the population that still speaks an indigenous language, and there's just so much diversity and so much awesome knowledge to learn around food, because literally, like, you can walk out your back door and you can see the food everywhere, because people obviously survived on these lands for thousands of years using just plants and animals, which is pretty amazing. And we just overlook everything, and we're so disconnected from these foods right outside, you know? So there's a lot we can learn as professional chefs, and just really think about how diverse our regions are and how we can bring that into our own food systems that we have today.
So when did you know that cooking was your thing? What was the What was that ratatouille moment?
I grew up with food for the most part, but coming from a reservation, we didn't have a lot of money like a lot of people on the reservation. And my mom moved us off the reservation and started going back to college, and she was raising myself and my sister. So I started cooking at home at a fairly young age, and then I jumped into the restaurants when I was barely 13.
Wow.
And I started restaurants at that super young age. So I worked restaurants all through high school, all through college, and then after college I moved to Minneapolis from the Black Hills of South Dakota and continued working restaurants and worked my way up into an executive chef position in the cities. And when I got that executive chef position, I wasn't really classically trained. I had read a lot, and I had taught myself a lot, and I had traveled a lot.
Street smarts.
Basically, and, a good amount of experience in my pocket by then too. So I just continued to grow and learn with it, but that's been my path ever since.
Yeah. So as you've transitioned from that more Escoffier-designed kitchens, right? I mean, even if it's like a Chilean hot dog house, it was still influenced by Escoffier. What techniques or tools do you wish that you had for the type of cuisine that you're cooking now?
Well, we do utilize a lot of really simple tools. So we do utilize a lot of tools that we've found, let's say, in Miss America. So we use a lot of pottery. We use a lot of things like clay kamals and cooking with fire. But because we're also in this modern world and we're bringing this food into the future, because we're not trying to do just a timepiece and cook like it's 1491.
Yeah.
We're just trying to absorb as much knowledge from the past and apply it to what we're doing today.
It is a form of fusion.
Yeah, it's a form of fusion, but we're really trying to hold on to the authenticity by utilizing just those indigenous ingredients if possible, and really focusing and featuring the pre-colonial flavors that we have in front of us.
Right.
But in a modern kitchen, of course, like we have a catering company in Minneapolis. We cook for thousands of people. So we need obviously modern equipment, and we use all sorts of stuff. And we travel around to many different tribes, and we always got a van full of sheet pans and full pans and all sorts of things, induction burners, and we have to stay modern because we want to be able to feed people efficiently, and the way to do that is also utilizing the skills that we have as professional chefs.
Right, cool. So if you could go back to your culinary career in the early days and have one nugget of knowledge that you would be given then, that you now know, what would it be?
Right.
Youth wasted on the young, that kind of question.
It's very true. I think just studying, so I think traveling helps a lot. So for me personally, I would save a lot of my money when I was that age and take a trip and spend 3 weeks in Europe and really try to understand how people are eating and the history of a certain place and region. And that mindset really helped me when I started studying this cuisine with Native American cuisine, because it was a broken and fractured history and knowledge base, and it took me a lot of study to really start to understand it. And we're never going to fully understand it. It's going to be a lifetime worth of learning for me, and we're just happy to share as we go along for the ride.
I mean, you're really going to be the first, hopefully, in generations that are exploring this cuisine. But as you've said before, it's your line, there was no joy of Native American or Indigenous people's cooking.
Right, it's true.
Yeah. So how did you go about that? How did you go about that study? I mean, you've got your elders, and then you've got the world, right?
Yeah, so, for me, it wasn't reaching that far back, because I was born on Pine Ridge Reservation in 1974. And at that point in time, it hadn't even been 100 years since the Lakota had lost the Black Hills region to the U.S. government, and they were still trying to hold on within that 100-year period.
Yeah.
So I was just reaching back to my great-grandparents' generation of how my great-grandfather grew up, how he was surviving on the plains with the Lakota, all the traditions that went into that, the kind of foods, and that's really where I kind of started. So for me, I knew that there was this really deep connection with the plants around us, and that knowledge of all of these plants. So, forcing ourselves to stop calling everything a weed if we don't know what it is. That just means we don't know what it is, right? So we started learning the names and the meanings of all these plants around us, because everything out there had a purpose, right?
Yeah.
So we started applying that knowledge, and we're still learning. There's a lot to learn, of course, and I didn't go to school to be classically trained as an ethnobotanist by any means, but I was a really curious chef and a really curious cook, and I just really wanted to understand and learn.
Yeah.
So I started really studying plants a lot and really understand how people were utilizing these plants through various books of ethnobotanical texts and archaeological texts, and talking to elders, of course. But the biggest part was really just getting out there and playing with it, like identifying these plants myself, bringing them back into the kitchen, starting to process them, and just being, really curious about all these flavors and seeing how I can mix and match all of these pieces. And then slowly over time of studies, finding little snippets that were solidifying some of these, the thoughts that I had, that they're probably utilizing something like this. And if this tribe was doing it like this tribe was probably also doing it. And starting to piece it together little by little over quite a few years, because I took about 6 years of self-study of just focusing on this in my own personal before I started my own company and started actually doing it in real time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. How many times did you trip over yourself or try something and that didn't work out? That didn't taste good. That nearly killed me.
Yeah, it definitely happens. There's definitely been a couple of times I ate something in a forest I probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm still here, so that's a good sign.
Yeah.
And in the beginning days, we were really stuck with that European style of cooking because where it's kind of beat into you as a chef. You learn all this French technique and everything, and it's a really important part of the base of it. And we were trying to manipulate foods to fit into that mold. So we would try to make things with those ratios. We need this binder and this liquid and these flours, and trying to make stuff like that.
Right.
And then we eventually just realized we didn't need any of that. We could actually just work with these foods. So we just started teaching ourselves these foods from the ground up, literally, and just keeping it really simple with minimal tools, and that's what really helped us thrive.
So how do you bridge that, you've got your clay and your fire and things like that, but then you've got a great induction burner or a huge industrial mixer, right? Mm-hmm. That, can get a lot done, even though it's essentially would have been done by hand, but you're cooking for thousands of people when you're doing your catering company. So how do you bridge that in your mind? Because every other chef in America is saying, if I just had this piece of equipment, then I could do this, and that's how that's done.
I think it's great to know, the very basics, the traditional ways of everything, and how to utilize some of those old tools, and taking that knowledge and just applying it to where we are today. So, I can hand grind everything with a stone, mortar and pestle, but then again, it's so much easier to throw things into a food processor and buzz it up, and when it does basically the same situation. So, as professional chefs, we have to use a lot of this moving forward, and especially we have to be really wary of health and those kinds of issues too. Mm-hmm. So that's a big part of how we do things. And there's sometimes we're doing small demos, we're doing only traditional ways and using very traditional tools and showcasing that. But a lot of times we're behind the scenes cooking huge events for massive amounts of people, and we're lucky that we have all of this great equipment around us to work with, because there's so much that really helps us out.
Yeah. So this book is a beautiful book. Mm-hmm. And I was so pleased. I texted you the night you won. I was so pleased. This is the first time I can actually congratulate you in person. Did so on the phone, but
right.
Yeah. How? I guess I'm going to say I was maybe as shocked, if not more than you, when it was both nominated and won, because this category has been filled with so many cookbooks that were basically enamored of cuisine that came from Europe.
Right.
And every once in a while, recently we've had a barbecue, cookbook win, which is still, that's an indigenous thing, right? Barbacoa, that's what the Spaniards, observed when they came to the Caribbean. But this is truly American food. Mm-hmm. This is a stake in the ground in our cooking history.
Yeah, and we talk about that a lot too, because again, it's extremely underrepresented, and it's very new to a lot of people, and we call it ironically foreign, basically, right?
that's both perverse and beautiful all at the same time. Makes my stomach turn and laugh.
And we have to break it to a lot of people that there is history in the Americas before Laura Ingalls out here.
Right.
And there's a lot of beautiful things that we can learn from the plants and the trees and the animals, and the way the people that have lived here for so long were utilizing all this, because we look at all this diverse indigenous culture and communities that were all across the board from every square, every area in North America people were utilizing and living in, mm-hmm. and how they were able to do that with utilizing just plants and animals from those regions,
Yeah.
And there's a large area where agriculture happens, and it's so wonderful to find all these heirloom seeds and to be able to see all these seed keepers and these farmers and growers growing out this beautiful native crops that have have lasted that colonial period, and that takeover in the 1800s.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's so much to learn, and we're just happy to keep spreading and keep working and keep showcasing it.
When you go out in the field and you do pop-ups, or you're not in a kitchen, do you cook with induction, which is so great if you have an electrical source?
Yeah, for sure, because we find ourselves in many different communities with varying levels of resources to utilize this for kitchens. So we often bring a whole bunch of equipment on our own. So we have like the Vollrath induction burners, and we bring just basically our van full of stuff. So we got the speed racks and all of the pans and everything we can think we might need when it comes to being able to pull off a big community dinner,
right,
just to be safe on our end. So we've traveled all around Minnesota, Iowa, Dakotas, Wisconsin with our little catering van, bringing all that equipment with us and all the food that we need to pull these dinners off.
Yeah.
So we've been, we do hundreds of dinners a year. So
yeah, cool.
Yeah.